Hi, my name is Jerry Kroth. I'm a professor in California, psychologist, and I have made 3 videos in the last 4 years on climate change. Okay, 1, and then 2, and then 3. I keep making them because it keeps getting worse. Now, in those videos, I have tried to convince some people who are skeptics who think it's a hoax, and I spent my time doing some of that. This video is not for you. If you still think climate change is a hoax, you need to leave right now. This is not meant for you, okay? This is for people who know that something is really wrong and that it's real. So for you, this is going to be an eye-opener, even for you. We are living in an asylum, all of us, okay? We're sitting on and looking at our media today, and we're saying, is it DeSantis? Is it Trump? What do you think about abortion limits? Why any limits? What about pronouns? What about pronouns? Have we helped Ukraine enough? What do you mean by that? Should we free Assange? Who cares? That's what we are talking about right as we speak. Except that the asylum that we're living in is on fire. And that makes what we're talking about kind of insane. Okay, even though we don't think it's insane. Now, let's talk about the fire in our asylum. All right? That means we're talking about delusion, denial, our own escapism, distraction, and loss of contact with reality. And I'm speaking about us. Okay? All brought to you by the Koch brothers, the fossil fuel industry, Chevron, Exxon, and the mainstream media. They keep you fussing about all the wrong things. Biden's frailty, Trump's corruption, Hunter's laptop, gender-affirming care, Barbie. That's what's going on in the water coolers of America as we speak. So let's take a moment to face reality, shall we? We're going to look straight into the dark-looking glass of reality. So let's start with our familiar conditioned delusions. We all suffer from these things. We know that global warming is a problem. Yes, we do. But we sort of think something is being done about it. Yes, we do. I mean, look, Copenhagen is going to be carbon neutral in 2025. That is very astonishing. And we read about these gigantic wind turbines that are going up. That's encouraging. We hear about solar farms that are massive. And we say, my God, something really is happening. California is planning to become net zero by 2045. So there's something really hopeful and encouraging going on. Unfortunately, if we face reality, the reality is that humanity is not doing anything about global warming. Okay? Those are just headlines. This is CO2. Okay, take a look carefully. Do you see it bending? Do you see it plateauing? Do you see it turning around? Do you see it going down? Nope. Going straight up. This is methane. Many times worse than CO2. You see it plateauing? You see it turning around? You see it bending? Nope. Going straight up. This is nitrous oxide. Going straight up. Now, it's all 2023, folks. That means nothing is happening. It's all fluff. Okay? If you came from another planet and landed here, you'd say, why are these people destroying their habitat? They're not doing anything to stop it. Nothing. All right, so let's talk about 2 degrees of warming, okay? Because that's the biggie. And that's what I want to focus on a little bit. All right, so 2 degrees of warming, so say many, many people, is a point of no return. Okay, you can't put the genie back in the bottle at that moment in time. So, what happens when you get to 2 degrees of warming, planetary warming? Well, mosquitoes and malaria will come as far north as Chicago and Copenhagen. 3 billion people will be short of water at 2 degrees of warming. Wheat and corn yields will fall by a quarter. The wet bulb effect makes the tropics uninhabitable. What you mean by that is when you have 35 degrees centigrade temperature, you can live with that. But if you add humidity into that, it becomes unlivable. It's called the wet bulb effect. It's a mixture of temperature and humidity. The tropics at 2 degrees of warming become uninhabitable. Okay? There's expected to be 1.2 billion climate refugees running north or running south from these areas at 2 degrees of warming. Now, the science says that between 5 and 18% of mammals will go extinct. So I use the low figure, 5%. We're mammals. 5% of the human race is 400 million people. That's 7 World War IIs. Okay, at 2 degrees of warming. Here's the president of Barbados.
For those who have eyes to see, for those who have ears to listen, and for those who have a heart to feel, 1.5 is what we need to survive. 2 degrees, yes, SG, is a death sentence for the people of Antigua and Barbuda, for the people of the Maldives, for the people of Dominica and Fiji, for the people of Kenya and Mozambique, and yes, for the people of Samoa and Barbados. We do not want that dreaded death sentence. And we've come here today to say, try harder, because our people, the climate army, the world, the planet, needs our actions now, not next year, not in the next decade. Thank you.
So, if you think, well, I'm making this stuff up, I don't do that. Those are your references for those claims. Okay, now, the next question is, when does 2 degrees happen? Now, I have to tell you, we have to do a little science. I don't do rants. I don't expect that you want to hear someone rant. So we have to delve a little bit into science to make sure that our arguments here are sound and the statements we're making, which are really catastrophic, are sound and based on sound evidence. So I'd like to read a couple quotes. CO2 is measured in parts per million, ppm. A level of 450 parts per million has generally been associated with an average global temperature rise of 2 degrees centigrade. Scientific American. Okay? Not all scientists agree with that. We have a 50% chance of stabilizing at 2 degrees if we keep concentrations under 450 parts per million. Okay? The limits imply an atmospheric concentration of no more than 450 parts per million for 2 degrees, 430 parts per million for 1.5 degrees. Okay? So, that is pretty much consensus, although you can read a few articles that say no. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you something. I'm a psychologist. I'm going to play with a graph. Watch very carefully. I'm drawing a line. I'm drawing a line into the future. Okay? That is a psychological line of CO2. And you know what that line means? It means that we are going to continue to do exactly what we have been doing, which is talking the talk, but not walking the walk. And CO2 will continue rising as it has. That's what that line means. Now, I want you to see this is 1.5 degrees in our future. This is 450 parts per million. This is 2 degrees, the threshold. There is an actual gap between CO2 and temperature. If you hit 450 CO2, it'll still take 2, 3, 4, 5 years before you The oceans warm up to 2 degrees. Okay? So there is a gap. But that's the threshold. That's the critical point. Now, let's calculate doomsday, the day of no return. We can calculate the trend or we can graph the trend. And this is so important. Let's do it both ways. So watch carefully. In 2015, it was 399.4 parts per million. That's the annual average, not 1 month, the annual average. In 2022, it had risen to 418.5 ppm. Stick with me. That means it's rising at 2.7 ppm per year. Okay? That line is going up 2.7 ppm per year. That means we will hit 430 parts per million 3.3 years from now, 2027. And we will hit 450 parts per million 10 years from now. That's 2034. Okay? Now, how did you do that again? Let me take it through it very slowly. In 2022, it was 418.5. Then we added 2.7 to it. And so in 2023, it's 431 or 421. And then we add 2.7 every year, add 2.7 every year, add 2.7. And when are we going to hit 1.5 degrees of warming threshold? 430 parts per million, 2027. Now remember, in 1992, they had the Kyoto Accords and said, we cannot get to 1.5 degrees of warming. In 2016, there was another conference and another conference and another set of agreements, and everybody signed it, and 80% of the countries didn't live up to their pledges. So we're going to get to 1.5 degrees of warming 3.3 years from now. That's when we hit that threshold. Okay? So, well, then when is doomsday? When is the point of no return? When is 2 degrees? When is 450 parts per million? Okay, that's the threshold for 2 degrees of warming. Stick with me. This is getting, I wish I had to put a drum roll in at this point. So let's keep calculating. Let's keep adding 2.7 parts per million. Every year, 2028, it's going to be 434. Plus, that line is still going up. 2030, it's going to be 440. 2031, 442.8. 2032, 445, 2033, 448, 2034, 450.9. Okay? We're making this video at the end of 2023. So from 2024 until 2034 is 10 years. 10 years. We hit 450 parts per million for 2 degrees in 2034 or 10 years. We have 10 years left. That's why I'm making this video. Let's double check. This is so serious. Let's look at another way of calculating this. Make sure we're on the right footing. We calculated the trend arithmetically by adding 2.7, but let's do it graphically and see if it comes out the same way. What do you mean by that? Let's take a look at this graph and let's see if we can figure it out that way. We're going to draw the line, and that's the line that says we keep doing exactly what we're doing. Okay? And now we're going to extend out the x-axis and the y-axis into the future. All right? So here's the future looking at you. 2030, 2040. Now, here's 1.5 degrees. Okay, when are we going to hit 1.5 degrees? Let's draw the arrow. Boom. 2027. Maybe 2028. That's 430 parts per million in 2028. Okay? So we've got 4.3 years, not 3.3 years. If we graph it, got an extra year reprieve. Follow this now. We're drawing the line. We're looking into the future. We're extending the x-axis. We're extending the y-axis. We want to know about doomsday. When are we going to hit 450? Okay, that's 2 degrees. When is that going to happen? Look at that. Okay? That's 450, 2036. That's 12 years from now. Okay. We've got 12 years, not 10 years. Okay, two methods we used. One, we calculated it by adding 2.7. The other, we graphed it. And each time, either we have 10 years or we have 12 years before we cross the 450 parts per million threshold of 2 degrees of warming. Okay, that's pretty much our science. At best, we have 12 years left. Okay? It's still awful. Okay, for 6 or 7 World War IIs to happen. Now, there's one more problem I need to introduce, so we're not exactly done with the science yet, okay? CO2 is not increasing at a constant rate. We've been pretending it's going up 2.7 every year at a constant rate. Not true, okay? We may have less time than we think. The rate of increase is increasing. What do you mean? Watch this. It is not a constant at 2.7. Here's a graph of CO2 increases. See that red line? That's 1960, and CO2 has increased about 1 part per million per year in 1960. Look at this graph, at this arrow. That's 1980. It has now increased 2 parts per million per year. It's going up. It's not a constant. The rate of increase is increasing. Okay? It's going to hit 3.0 parts per million soon. Okay? That means we have less time. If it starts to go at 3 parts per million, we will hit 450 parts per million earlier than 12 years from now. I hope this is not confusing. It's 2 years earlier from now. Okay, the point of no return is 10 to 12 years from now, okay? But likely only 10 years from now. That's the title of this video. Now, some professors have said the same thing. The point of no return is 2035, says this professor from the Netherlands. 2035, Yale Environmental Review. Point of no return, 2035, Oxford. 2035, another Oxford professor. That's the point, that you can't take the genie out of the bottle. So, is Jerry Kroth trying to scare us with this video? And I'll tell you what, the answer is absolutely. Now, here are some possible futures. Okay? Let's put our lines in, x-axis and y-axis. There's 2034, 2030, 2040. Now this is what Greta Thunberg wants to do. Okay? She wants it to decrease to 360 parts per million. She wants to save her generation from planetary disaster. She is a radical, a real radical, and that is what she wants. And that is a very sane, almost impossible to achieve objective. Now let's say you had a radical approach, and everybody's going to make every effort they can, and all these agreements are going to be signed, and we're going to stay under 1.5 degrees, and we're going to plateau, and we're going to somehow stop this acceleration. That is what another sane and rational person would hope for. This is meaning we're going to stay the same, keep talking the talk, but not doing anything, really. And the other possibility is quite real, and that is an exponential increase in CO2, because we're increasing all the time, and it may cross a threshold where it can't stop. So,
the situation we are witnessing now is the demonstration that climate change is out of control. If we persist in delaying key measures that are needed, I think we are moving into a catastrophic situation.
The Arctic holds twice as much carbon as the atmosphere. It's frozen into the permafrost, into the tundra. As it melts, CO2 is released, and so is methane, which is 20, 30 times stronger than CO2. So 2 degrees is the tipping point for the melting of the permafrost in the tundra. After that, it's not going to go from 450 to 460. It's going to go from 450 to 900. Twice as much CO2 frozen into the earth. This is a Russian guy who punches a hole into the permafrost and ignites the escaping methane. Holes in Siberia have opened up. As the permafrost is melting, methane blows out and creates these incredible, unusual craters. Methane is already boiling up.
Giant craters are forming in northern Siberia, and it may have dire consequences across the world. Rising temperatures in the Yamal Peninsula are causing its long frozen ground called permafrost to thaw. The last time the permafrost melted was 130,000 years ago, and it happened over thousands of years. This time, it's warming over just decades or a century, and that may be causing these giant sinkholes to form across the area. Not only does that create danger for the Siberians who rely on the frozen ground, it could be contributing to the buildup of greenhouse gases. The bottom line, craters in Siberia could mean trouble.
That wasn't all they discovered. As they went deeper and deeper below the surface, down to depths of about 350 meters, they ran into huge plumes of bubbles rising up from the seabed. Those bubbles were methane gas escaping from melting permafrost, and the concentrations were found to be 400 times higher than had previously been expected. And that is a problem.
2 degrees is where you breach the tipping point in the Arctic. All right? The 2-degree threshold. We will likely hit 2-degree threshold in 10 to 12 years. That means the Arctic permafrost tipping point will be breached. That means that massive releases of methane and CO2 will begin, if they haven't started already. It means 1 billion climate refugees will start crawling out of the tropics.
The threat of refugees as a consequence of climate change is an enormous national security issue.
Europe is spending millions to defend itself against immigration from Africa.
When the Pentagon begins to think about what might happen, that's a clear indication that we have to start taking something seriously.
The tropics become uninhabitable, basically. The world's tropics could become uninhabitable. And again, 5 to 18% of mammals are facing extinction. We are mammals, and if we use the low number of 5%, that's 400 million human beings likely to perish at 2 degrees. Some people are more extreme.
I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day.
So this year we had 35 million refugees. Not all climate, a lot economic migrants. But when we start hitting these new numbers, 56 degrees centigrade, we're going to get 1 billion climate refugees streaming out of the tropics.
We've had lots of civilizations collapse in the past from environmental causes.
Our responses at the moment are inadequate in terms of coping with these newly displaced people.
So this summer of 2023, Phoenix hit 110 degrees every single day for 30 days. Never happened before. Okay. There were 1,000 fires in Canada, many of which could not be reached and put out. The soot and the smoke from these fires reached Chicago, New York, the Northeast. That's a map of the smoke across North America from these fires. In Libya, there was a flood that killed 11,000 people. This is just a few weeks ago. There are floods, incredible floods in India at the same time, and in China. You know, the conclusion from this summer is you ain't seen nothing yet, baby. It's just starting. So, how do we stop this darkness? What do we do? What could be done? Are there any remedies? Is there still time? Think extreme and then think more extreme. There are things we must do and there are things that we must stop. Okay? So, what we must do. I wrote a book called Ecocide in which I reviewed the literature on this subject. And one of the best books is called Drawdown, written by a consortium of scientists listing 89 ways to reduce CO2. Okay? So, here are your extreme conclusions that I've cobbled together from that research. We need to, we're not talking about the United States, we're talking about the world. We need to build 34,000 square miles of solar panels, almost half the size of Spain. We need to build 750,000 wind turbines and get them out right away. We need 115 state-of-the-art nuclear reactors per year, beginning now. And we need to stop the bickering about Taiwan and Ukraine and get China and France and the United States and Russia and India together and have a Manhattan Project that is worldwide to establish and create nuclear fusion. We're close, but we keep saying it's 10 years off. It's 10 years off. Everybody's working separately. We need to all work together on a huge cross-cultural, international Manhattan Project. This could save the world. This could stop us from burning fossil fuels. But we're not there yet at all. Total cost about $28 trillion worldwide. And that has to start now in 10 years. JP Morgan says 50 trillion. My research says 28 trillion would get us there. Okay. Starting this year, equivalent to the budget of the Pentagon every year in America. Taxes go up. Now, there are things that we need to stop. We need to stop Indonesia. We need to stop China. We need to stop Brazil. We need to stop cars. We need to stop wildfires. And we need to stop Wall Street. Okay. So Indonesia is burning peatlands to create palm oil plantations for their export crop. And they're burning this stuff. And the CO2 from these Indonesian fires is greater than the emissions of the United States economy. Okay. And they're doing it every year. How do you stop it? Do you go to war with Indonesia? Impose sanctions, boycotts, quarantines, tariffs? I do not know. All I know is it has to stop now. Okay? You have to stop China. It accounts for 27% of all global emissions. That's China, nitrous oxide, satellite photo. Okay? Now, during the COVID crisis, the world economy stopped, world trade stopped for a month or so. The GDP of the United States went down by almost 39%. Look at the nitrous oxide from China before and then during. You see that? That's how to stop it. How do you stop it? Well, you had to stop the entire world economy to bring that nitrous oxide down. How do you stop China? War? You can't go to war with China. Sanctions, quarantines, boycotts, tariffs, a worldwide depression, trade embargoes? I don't know the answer. All I know is they have to be stopped. They have to be encouraged to stop all their emissions or we won't trade with them. We have to stop Brazil. That's the Amazon. That's called the lungs of the earth. That soaks in CO2 and emits oxygen. It's our lungs. And this is what they've done to the Amazon. Okay? 300,000 square miles of forest have been lost due to greedy mining and greedy farming. It's got to be stopped, not reduced, stopped. How do you stop it? War, sanctions, boycotts, quarantines, tariffs. Anybody here going to invade Brazil? You have to stop cars.
The site was the 405 freeway in Los Angeles Tuesday night. It's a highway infamous for gridlock, but nothing ever like this. From the air, it looks almost beautiful, but don't tell that to anyone caught up in this night.
So, the world burns 100 million barrels of oil every day, okay? Got to stop it. 90% of emissions come from burning fossil fuels. 85 million new cars were built in 2022 in the world. 14% were electric. So 71 million cars that burn gasoline, new cars on the road, added to what we already have. Okay, this is a projection of oil consumption by OPEC. Look at this line. It starts in 2020 to 2030. It's not going down. It's not plateauing. It's going up. We're going to burn 16% more gasoline in the next 10 years. We're not reducing it. We're not plateauing. We're not going down. We're going up 16%. We have to stop wildfires. These are Canadian wildfires. The red ones are out of control. You can't reach them, okay? Enough, 37 million acres burned this summer. I'm making this video at the end of this summer. That is the equivalent of the entire country of Greece burning down. That's how devastating these fires were. Now, there are two planes that could reach them. The 747 converted can take 20,000 gallons of water over 1,000 miles. The Ilyushin Russian plane converted can do the same. They only have two. These are called supertankers. The United States owns 13 supertankers. We need to stop the wildfires in northern Siberia and in Canada. Naomi Klein has written about climate change. She said, we need to get a hose. Okay. I don't know anyone who's proposed this, but we need to take and have infrastructure and bases where these supertankers can be stationed so that when these fires break out, we have something that can reach them and put them out. We have nothing currently. They had to evacuate the town of Yellowknife because they couldn't deal with the fires. We need to have a fire department up there. Canadian wildfires released as much CO2 as all airline traffic in the world for the year. Just these summer fires. They released more CO2 than the entire country of Japan. Has to stop, have to put it out. We have to stop Wall Street. Wall Street is saying, buy these oil stocks, you'll make a fortune. Buy these oil stocks that are selling gasoline and refineries. And yes, but these are you'll make a 9% yield by investing in oil stocks for maximum profit. How do you stop fossil fuel consumption? Require electric cars, higher taxes on gasoline, rationing gasoline worldwide. There was an ecologist named Lester Brown, passed away in 2017. Brilliant, Harvard educated, said 10 years ago, we need to mobilize like World War II. We need to stop building cars and start building solar panels, okay? We need to, in World War II, they rationed sugar. They rationed gasoline in World War II. Okay, if you had presidential emergency powers and presidential emergency decrees, you could start it, but it has to be worldwide. Now, do you know any politician who supports rationing gasoline? Have you ever heard anybody say we need to ration gasoline in this country? Blasphemy, heresy, or any place. Have you actually seen or heard any politician running for office anywhere in the United States who supports any of the things we've just talked about? I'm sorry. How about any politician in the world who supports any of the things that we are talking about? I'm sorry, I can't name any. So the sad conclusion of this talk is these are the victims of what we're talking about. These are the children of the future who are going to grow up into the world that we have created by our psychotic behavior, by our inaction, by our paralysis, by our talking about all the wrong things for so long and not doing anything real or substantive about the problem. They are the victims. And when they're 50 years old, they're going to look, if we're still alive, they're going to say, what were you doing then? You had 10 years left. Were you buying oil stocks? Was your 401k invested in fossil fuels? Did you drive a car that burned gasoline? Why didn't you do anything when you could have?
How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
So, if you'll pardon me as a psychologist, I'm going to make a prediction from my research. And my prediction, unfortunately, is that we're going to stay the same. We're going to talk the talk, but not walk the walk. It's too much of an inconvenience. And we're going to go right there as we predicted. Or if things are just going to get out of hand and we're going to have an exponential increase in CO2. That's my prediction. Now remember, this is 2 degrees of warming, and this is the tipping point for the 2-degree threshold right there. Okay? Cross the 2-degree threshold in 10 years. Climate chaos, climate collapse, climate apocalypse. So that's all my lecture, but I want to make a personal statement to you. Okay, you. 2, 3, 4,000 people may see this video, but only a handful, 500, 300, will reach this point in the video like you did. So if you're listening to this video now, I would like to shake your hand. I would like to tell you that I admire you. I would like to tell you that you belong to a very special vanguard of people who are willing to look reality in the face and say, yep, this is the real world. If you're saying at this point in this video, holy shit, then we are on the same page, okay? And I want to congratulate you for being here. You see what is going to happen in the next 10 years. You could anticipate it, okay? Now I want to take you on a final journey. I want you to imagine something. Okay, you live in Germany. You know what is going to happen in the next 10 years. But it's 1935, not 1945. It's 10 years earlier. It's 1935. 10 years before Germany surrenders. Okay? You live in a small little village. Kind of pastoral. Kind of nice. Okay? There's a guy named Hitler who became chancellor who's out there shaking hands and people saying, oh, he's right-wing, but, I think he has the best interests of the German people in his heart. Yes, he's a bit anti-Semitic, but he's not going to kill anybody. I mean, he's just a little bit right-wing. But I think he's going to help Germany. Really. And you know that 10 years from now, 60 million people worldwide will have died. That every single German city will have been bombed to smithereens, that there will be starvation, that 6 million Jews will have been intentionally murdered, premeditated murder, and gypsies and handicapped people and mentally ill people. And 1 million people killed in one little 550-acre site called Auschwitz. You sense what's going to happen, okay? Your neighbors don't. They think you're exaggerating. Okay, they think you're crazy. They think you're weird. What are you going to do in 1935, you personally? Well, how about leaving? Einstein left. He was a smart man. He left in 1932, and he spent World War II in Princeton, New Jersey. Okay. Freud left in 1938. He was a pretty smart guy, too. And he got out and spent World War II in England. Are you going to leave Germany? What if you don't leave? What's going to happen if you either don't see the world, or you can't get out, you can't get a visa, you can't get permission, don't have the money? This is a Wikipedia page of all the Jews who are artists and intellectuals who were murdered by the Nazis. These are performing artists from Germany, died in various concentration camps. These are people who were authors and published authors killed by the Nazis. These are artists who were murdered by the Nazis. These are musicians who were murdered by the Nazis. Historians and writers and translators, mathematicians, natural scientists, medicine and psychology, physicians, lawyers, and rabbis and religious leaders and philosophers, all murdered by the Nazis. Sports figures, politicians murdered by the Nazis. That list goes on forever. So, now let's go back to the present. How about you now in global warming? Are you going to think about leaving? A lot of people have talked about, Peter Thiel, who I think he's a billionaire, bought some property in New Zealand. It's isolated. Maybe we can survive there. Lots of people. New Zealand has had so many people trying to buy property there, they've passed a law saying foreigners cannot buy property in New Zealand anymore. It's supposed to be isolated in a safe place, but you're going to have a lot of refugees coming out of Indonesia. And don't forget, the ozone hole opens up even bigger at 450 parts per million. And New Zealand is already the country with the highest skin cancer rates in the world. I don't know. The Great Lakes is supposed to be great. Duluth, Minnesota is having an influx of refugees already, buying up land. Prices are going up. But, you're going to have wildfires, you're going to have mosquitoes, you're going to have malaria, you're going to have toxic algae blooms in the lakes. Scandinavia, Murmansk, Russia, again, problems with refugees, shortages of food. But people are thinking about leaving, and they're making concrete plans. They really are. What are you going to do? Another thought is, how about joining the resistance? The German resistance, the Danish resistance was incredible in World War II. The French resistance, indomitable. What about joining the resistance for climate warming?
Ahead of a major March Sunday in New York City to escalate the fight to end fossil fuels, hundreds of climate activists blocked the entrances to Citibank's headquarters in Manhattan Thursday as part of a push to end financing for the fossil fuel industry. At least 25 people were arrested, including Alec Connon, co-director of Stop the Money Pipeline. He spoke to Democracy Now! After his release.
Citibank is the world's second largest funder of fossil fuels. Since the Paris Agreement was signed 7 years ago, which was supposed to be a pivotal turning point in the climate story, Citibank has loaned more than $332 billion to the coal, oil, and gas companies that are fueling the climate crisis and fighting climate action at every turn.
Now, I would recommend the most extreme group I can think of, which is Extinction Rebellion. Okay, look at their sign. 12 years to save the earth. Seems like they're on the same page that we are, or we're on the same page that they are. Okay, contribute, donate, join. Let's go back to 1935. Let's go back to the issue of the asylum. Okay, I'm making a broadcast in 1935. Okay, and you're a small select group of people who've gotten this far in the video, and you're listening. And you're listening to the truth, and you're listening to the real world and what's really happening. And there are only a few hundred of you out there that I know personally. Okay? So I'm trying to say that Hitler is a madman. He's crazy. He's psychotic. He is driving and drawing the German people into his own psychosis.
Lasst euch Zeit! In 4 Monaten haben wir 1,2 Millionen beseitigt. Wir werden weiter angreifen und nicht rasten, bis wir das Ziel erreicht haben.
And you're sort of taking notes. And I'm saying the largest Holocaust, that was the largest Holocaust of the 20th century. And you were making notes back there in 1935, okay? Well, most of the people were not like you. They were saying, oh, Hitler's a family man. He's a vegetarian in 1935. We're going to Home Depot and fixing up our place. We're walking around in our plaza. Life is relatively good. We're getting some Christmas ornaments with the new Nazi symbols on them. And and we're also planning a trip to Italy, going skiing maybe in 1936 in the winter. Yes, sir. And sir, your broadcasts are exaggerating. You are so negative. You're such a Debbie Downer. We hear your broadcasts. Ridiculous. That's the world of 1935. Okay? So let's go to talk about the asylum today and this broadcast to you. And you're sitting around and you're listening to this YouTube video. Okay? It's talking about climate chaos, climate apocalypse, the biggest Holocaust of the 21st century, equivalent to 6 or 7 World War IIs coming in 10 years. Okay? But inside the asylum, this is what's happening today. And in the news, we're talking about the Ukraine. We're talking about Taiwan. We're talking about Trump being indicted. We're talking about Biden maybe being impeached. We're talking about Russell Brand getting accused of rape. We're talking about Kim Jong-un's visit to see Putin. We're talking about Elon Musk all the time. We're talking about Drew Barrymore making an apology. Okay? And the people around you, your neighbors, are saying, we've got our eye on that SUV. I know it only gets 18 miles a gallon, but look at that baby. And we're getting ready for Christmas, and we're happy, and we're even thinking of taking a cruise to Italy. Okay? And you are exaggerating in your YouTube videos. You're so negative. You're such a Debbie Downer. That's what's going on today. All right. So you're living in an asylum, and you're the one who's sane. And I'm here to tell you that. And you're the one who I admire. They're the ones who are crazy. Don't forget that. Don't be distracted by all the propaganda. Keep the faith. Okay? So that's the book. All of this lecture is based on that. Those are the footnotes. Those are the references. You can contact me at that website. And one last comment. I'm broadcasting to you, right? But YouTube has an algorithm. Okay? And I don't advertise toothpaste during these lectures. It's not monetized, no commercials. So if you don't subscribe and click like, download it and pass it on and post it, it'll die. And in 2 or 3 months, you won't even be able to find this video. So I wish you well. This may be our last broadcast. Over and out.